Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I've been gone for 6 days. Just 6. My company sent me upstate for a new product rollout. Nothing glamorous. Early flights, endless meetings, hotel coffee that tasted like cardboard. Rachel didn't mind. She never did when I left for work. Said she enjoyed the space. "It lets me miss you," she'd joke, pulling my suitcase off the bed, already sliding into her quiet routine. It used to be endearing. Lately, it felt like she meant a little too much. When I pulled back into the driveway that Friday afternoon, I noticed the garbage bins were already out for pickup, even though collection wasn't until Monday. I didn't think much of it until I walked into the house. The lights were off. Quiet. The air smelled faintly like citrus cleaner, too fresh for the time of day. Everything was in its place. Too in place. I dropped my bag by the door, half expecting Rachel to come around the corner and greet me like she always used to. But she didn't. I called out once. Nothing. Upstairs, the bedroom was spotless. Her side of the bed still looked made. My side, the one I hadn't slept in for nearly a week, looked freshly pressed too. Odd. Rachel never made the bed if I wasn't there. Her routine was coffee, email, yoga, move on. But this was pristine. Hotel level neat. I ran my hand over the comforter. Cold. She got back home about an hour later. Breezed in through the back door with 2 grocery bags and a forced smile. "Hey," she said too brightly. "I didn't think you'd be back until tonight." I smiled, trying to gauge her tone. Finished early. Figured I'd beat traffic. She unpacked the bags like nothing was wrong, rattling off some story about a new neighbor she ran into at the store. I stood in the kitchen, listening, watching. Something was off. The rhythm. The energy. Her words hit the right beats, but her eyes didn't match. "Place looks great," I said casually. She nodded. "I did some cleaning. Couldn't sleep one night, so I just kept going." I almost believed her. That night, while she showered, I checked the laundry. Her hamper was empty. Spotless. But the dryer had just finished a load, clothes I didn't recognize. A few larger shirts. Not mine. A worn gray hoodie. Definitely not mine. I held it up and scanned for a logo or tag. Nothing. No name, no scent, nothing to anchor it. But it didn't belong here. I stuffed it back in, closed the lid, and walked away. The next morning, we had coffee like usual. She was talkative again, like she was overcompensating. Told me her mom was coming for Mother's Day brunch that weekend and asked if I'd help cook. I agreed without hesitation. Something in her voice felt off balance, like she wanted to lock everything back into place before I noticed it had shifted. Around noon, my buddy Keith dropped by to return a ladder I'd let him borrow. He hadn't seen Rachel in months, and when she came out to greet him, his eyes lingered. Not in a weird way, just curious. "You been hitting the gym?" he asked her. She laughed and shook her head. "Nope, just stress, I guess." But I knew that tone. The dodge. Rachel always gave it when she didn't want to answer truthfully. After he left, I sat on the porch, thinking. My house felt unfamiliar. My wife, rehearsed. And somewhere in all that quiet order, something didn't fit. That evening, while Rachel was upstairs on a call with her mom, I noticed a small envelope tucked behind one of the books in the living room shelf. Not hidden, not obvious. Just placed. Curious, I pulled it out. Inside was a thank you card. Handwritten, not addressed to me. I never thought I'd find peace in a place that wasn't mine. "Thank you for being patient with me. I wish we had more time together." No signature. I placed the card back and stood still for a long time. She hadn't just cleaned the house while I was gone. She'd cleaned something out. I didn't confront Rachel about the card. Not yet. Something about it felt too deliberate, like a test I wasn't supposed to find. Or worse, a leftover that was supposed to be gone. Either way, she hadn't meant for me to see it. That much I was sure of. So instead of making a scene, I started watching. Nothing aggressive. Just eyes open, ears tuned. I was no longer assuming everything in my home made sense. I was starting to notice how much of it didn't. The next few days were quiet. Rachel acted normal, too normal. She didn't question why I was home earlier from work than usual, or why I suddenly volunteered to help more around the house. She smiled through everything, laughed at the right moments, kissed me goodbye like she was still the woman I married. But underneath that surface was a tension so thin it could snap with the wrong word. I didn't want to snap it yet. I want to know exactly what it was hiding. Wednesday evening, I offered to take out the trash after dinner. As I pulled the bag from the bin, something clinked near the bottom. I reached in and pulled out a small black box, the kind you'd use for a watch or maybe a bracelet. Nothing fancy. I flipped it open. Inside was a pair of cufflinks. Silver. Clean. Polished. New. Not mine. I turned them over. One had a tiny engraving. Just initials. TJ. I stared at them for a long time. My hands didn't shake, but I felt the heat rising up my neck. My brain started running names. Co-workers. Neighbors. Family. Only one came to mind immediately. My cousin Travis Jameson. He'd been around more lately, stopping by to help fix the fence, offering to lend tools, even texting Rachel about weekend plans when I was unavailable. I hadn't thought much of it. We'd grown up like brothers. He was the guy I trusted with everything. But now, looking at those initials, the weight in my chest started pressing harder. I didn't ask Rachel about the box that night. I didn't sleep much, either. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I slipped the cufflinks into my pocket. Then I texted Travis. Got something for you. Can I swing by later? He replied within minutes. Sure, man. Everything good. I didn't answer. I drove across town after lunch. He lived alone in a rental near the edge of the neighborhood. Small place, always cluttered with gear from whatever his current hobby was. Today it was fishing rods and golf clubs. He answered the door in sweatpants and a ball cap. Hey, what's up? I handed him the box. These yours. He opened it. Blinked. No. What? They've got your initials. He looked again, squinting. Oh, that's a coincidence. They're not mine, though. I wore the cheap ones from the wedding. He pointed at a dusty dresser behind him where his old cufflinks sat in a dish. The same scratched-up pair he'd worn for years. I watched him closely. His face didn't flicker. No guilt, no tension, just confusion. You sure? He nodded. Positive. Why? Where'd you find these? I took the box back and shrugged. Thought I grabbed the wrong pair. We talked for a few minutes about meaningless things, sports, yard work, old neighbors. I left more confused than I came. If they weren't his, then whose were they? That night, Rachel seemed more at ease. She made dinner without glancing at her phone once. She even lit a candle, like she used to do during our first year of marriage. For a brief moment, I questioned everything. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe the cufflinks were an old gift she forgot about. Maybe the card wasn't hers. But then, after dinner, I went into the guest room to grab an extra blanket. Tucked halfway beneath the bed was a gift bag. It was red, neat, folded shut with tissue paper. I didn't open it at first. I just stared at it, long enough to know Rachel didn't leave it there by mistake. When I did open it, I found a tie. Navy blue, high-end. Still had the tag. Underneath was a small handwritten card. You looked amazing in this last time. Thought you should keep it. That was it. No name, no date, no signature. But it wasn't for me. I set the bag back exactly how I found it, closed the door, and stood in the hallway with my jaw locked and my thoughts spinning. Someone was getting gifts in my house. But it wasn't my cousin. And it definitely wasn't me. I didn't sleep much after I found the tie. My thoughts wouldn't stop rearranging themselves, like a puzzle with no corners, just floating pieces and a picture that kept changing the more I stared at it. I lay in bed beside Rachel, staring at the ceiling while she breathed evenly, completely unaware of what I now knew, or thought I knew. That was the worst part, the not knowing, the game of maybe and could be. So I decided to turn the game around. The next morning, while Rachel was in the shower, I slipped into the guest room with steady hands and a racing heart. The bag was still there, untouched, waiting for someone. I pulled the tie out again. It was a sharp piece, clean lines, deep navy, a slim modern cut that looked expensive even without a logo. I turned it over and reached for the small scissors I'd tucked into my pocket. One clean snip through the lining. Not big enough to ruin it completely, just enough to warp the fabric if someone actually wore it. A small act. Quiet. Petty. But mine. Then I put it back exactly how I found it, folded the tissue with surgical care, and left the room without a sound. That afternoon, I watched Rachel move around the house like nothing had changed. She played music while she cleaned. She hummed a little. At one point, she caught me watching and smiled. What? She said, laughing. Nothing. Just looking at you. She walked over and kissed my cheek, light as air, and went back to wiping down the counter. I watched her hands, how calm they were, how practiced, how she never missed a beat. That night, she said she had a video call with a friend from college. She took it in the guest room with the door closed. I sat in the hallway, pretending to scroll my phone, listening for a second voice. But I heard only hers. Light laughter, quiet conversation. Every so often, she'd lower her voice. Not enough to hear words. Just tone. It didn't feel like a call about friendship. When she came out, she looked surprised to see me sitting there. "Still up?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She nodded, walking past. "Same." The next day, I checked the guest room again. The bag was gone. Completely. No sign of it in the trash. Not under the bed. Not in the closet. Like it had vanished without ever being there. I went through the house in silence, checking for anything out of place. Found nothing. But when I checked the entryway table, something caught my eye. Rachel's calendar, flipped open, had a new note in her handwriting. "Mom's here all day Sunday. Don't forget brunch." And underneath it, something in smaller letters. Prep gift. Not by gift. Prep. I stared at the word for a long time. Sunday was Mother's Day. Her mom and stepdad, Tom, were coming. We'd hosted before, brunch, coffee, casual catching up. It wasn't unusual, but the phrasing hit wrong. Prep gift wasn't a reminder to shop. It was a reminder to package, to deliver. That evening, I sat with my coffee while Rachel FaceTimed her mom, confirming Sunday's plan. She laughed a little too loud again, looked my way once like she was checking if I was listening. I pretended not to be. She said everything a daughter should say. Promised mimosas. Promised to make it special. When she hung up, she walked over and wrapped her arms around my shoulder from behind. "You okay?" she asked, voice low. "Of course. Just thinking." She kissed the side of my neck, slow and rehearsed. "About what?" "Brunch," I said. "Hope it turns out the way you want." She paused a moment, then let out a soft laugh. "It will. Trust me." That night, I set up a small camera in the guest room, hidden behind the stack of books on the shelf, just in case. I wasn't planning to use it, but I needed a way to confirm what I already felt crawling up my spine. And I ordered a second camera. Smaller. One that could sit in plain sight and be mistaken for part of the decor. I hadn't decided where I'd place it yet. Rachel was still lying. That much I knew. But the cufflinks weren't for Travis. The tie wasn't for me. And now, I was watching the house like it was a crime scene, waiting for the next piece to move. I never thought of Scott as a threat. He was harmless, really, mid-30s, married, 2 kids, the kind of guy who wore fleece vests and kept lawn care tips in his phone. But lately, I started noticing patterns. He lived 3 doors down, and somehow he always seemed to run into Rachel. She mentioned him in passing more often than usual, how he helped her carry groceries inside, how he recommended a podcast, how they bumped into each other at the farmer's market while I was out of town. She never lingered on the details, just enough to drop his name, then move on, like she wanted to normalize it, like she was planting the idea that it was nothing, when maybe it was something. I started paying attention. On Thursday, she took our dog for a walk, said she'd be gone 20 minutes. I waited 10, then stepped outside and took a slow walk around the block. Sure enough, her path had curved past Scott's house, and there she was in his driveway, standing a little too close while they chatted. She had that tilt in her posture I hadn't seen in a while, the one she used to give me when we first started dating, like everything I said was more interesting than it actually was. Scott smiled, nodded, said something that made her laugh. I ducked back behind the fence and waited until she was gone. I didn't want to make assumptions. I wanted proof. That evening, I reviewed the guest room camera. Nothing. Still empty. The bed untouched. I checked the calendar again. The prep gift note was still there, circled now. And Sunday was closing in. I didn't sleep well Friday night. I kept imagining conversations that hadn't happened, trying to picture how Rachel looked at me when she lied. Was there a difference in her voice when she spoke to me versus when she talked to him? Had she stopped loving me? Or had she just started loving someone else more? I kept playing the mental film on loop until I didn't trust anything that had happened in the last month. Saturday morning, I saw my opening. Rachel had gone out to pick up a few things for brunch. She said it casually, keys in hand, already halfway out the door before I could ask what things. I gave it 10 minutes, then walked straight over to Scott's house. His wife's car wasn't in the driveway. That alone made my pulse kick up. I knocked twice. He opened the door a few seconds later, wearing a t-shirt and socks, looking surprised but not alarmed. "Hey," he said, blinking. "Everything okay?" "I need to ask you something," I said. Sure." Had he been seeing Rachel? Outside of casual chats. He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, anything more than neighbor talk." He stepped out onto the porch, lowered his voice. "Whoa, wait. Is something wrong?" I didn't answer, just stared. He looked around, then leaned in. "Ethan, I swear, nothing's going on. Yeah, we talk sometimes, but it's just neighbor stuff. I've got enough trouble trying to keep up with my own wife." I scanned his face. No guilt, no nervistiques, just confusion and a little fear. "I saw you too," I said. "In the driveway. You were standing close." He shook his head. "Man, she was telling me about her mom's health. She got emotional. I said something stupid and tried to make her laugh. That's it." I didn't respond. My thoughts were too loud. "I'm not that guy, Ethan," he added quietly. "Never have been." I nodded once and turned away. My gut had been wrong before. And now, the pieces didn't quite fit. Scott didn't carry the same energy. Whatever was happening with Rachel, it wasn't him. I walked back home with my thoughts twisting in on themselves. The gift was still missing. The tie was gone. The cufflinks had vanished. The room was clean. The cameras hadn't picked up movement. But I could feel it. Something was happening under the surface. Rachel wasn't just lying. She was preparing. That night, she asked if I want to watch a movie. I said yes. Sat beside her with popcorn and a smile. Played the role. Halfway through, I excused myself and went into the garage. I had an idea. If I couldn't catch her in a lie, I'd let her walk straight into it. And I'd be ready when she did. The strange thing about knowing someone's lying is how quickly every word they say starts to feel like code. Even their silence becomes suspicious. Rachel's voice used to feel like home, predictable, familiar. Now it sounded rehearsed. Every smile was a performance. Every, "How was your day?" felt like a deflection. But what kept me off balance was how good she was at it. She hadn't flinched once, hadn't slipped, hadn't cracked. And that meant one thing. She'd been doing this longer than I realized. Sunday was closing in, and the guest room camera still hadn't caught a thing. I checked it every morning, every night. Just static, an empty bed, unused space. But that didn't match the gift bag, the tie, the card, the cufflinks. So either someone else had been using that room and covering their tracks, or she was seeing someone outside the house altogether. I kept circling back to the prep gift note. I looked at it every time I passed the calendar, like it would rewrite itself if I stared long enough. But it never changed, and neither did the gut feeling that something big was coming. That afternoon, I ran a test. While Rachel was out picking up wine and flowers for her mom, I walked through every room of the house and set a single item in the wrong place. Moved the salt from the stove to the dining table. Flipped a pillow on the couch upside down. Shifted a chair by a few inches. Nothing huge, just enough to see if someone else came through and adjusted it back. I checked every hour. Nothing moved. Then I checked the guest room. The closet door, which had been cracked open earlier, was now completely shut. Not locked, just closed like someone had noticed it out of place and fixed it. But Rachel hadn't been home yet. I checked the camera feed. Still clean. Still silent. Unless someone had been careful enough to walk in blind spots. Later that night, she made dinner like it was just another night. Her mom was coming in the morning, and she seemed relaxed, humming again, like she wasn't spinning 1,000 lies behind her smile. I watched her closely as she pulled the wine from the fridge. "Did you pick up everything you needed?" I asked. "Yep," she said. "Got the sparkling juice your mom likes too." "My mom." She paused, caught mid-reach for a glass. "I meant mine. Just slipped out." "Right." She didn't recover quickly from that one. Her smile flickered for a second too long. We ate quietly. She talked about the brunch menu and asked me to grab the folding chairs from the garage. I nodded and excused myself, walking out into the cool dark, where I'd already set the second camera up earlier in the day. This one faced the backyard door and had motion alerts. I wasn't going to miss another visit, no matter how careful they were. Just before I turned in for the night, I walked through the guest room one last time. I opened the closet. Empty, but something was different. The air smelled faintly of cologne. Not mine. Something sharp and woodsy, like cedar or leather. And it hadn't been there yesterday. I stepped back and closed the door. Slowly, deliberately. She wasn't seeing someone outside the house. They were coming here, and they knew how to hide. That night, I didn't say anything. Rachel curled beside me in bed, her breathing steady, her hands warm. I stared at the ceiling again, listening, waiting. She wasn't slipping, but the walls were. And tomorrow, with both families under one roof, she'd have nowhere left to hide. I woke up early Sunday morning, earlier than usual. I didn't sleep much again. I stared at the ceiling in the gray pre-dawn light, my ears tuned to Rachel's breathing, still slow and even. She shifted once beside me, murmured something in her sleep, then went still again. I rolled out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her, and walked down the hall into the kitchen. The house was still. Cold somehow. Not from temperature. Something else. An emptiness. Like it knew something was about to snap. I turned on the coffee maker and stared at the calendar while it brewed. Prep gift. The words mocked me. They'd been sitting there for a week, untouched, bold in their simplicity. But there was no gift in sight. No bag. No tapping. Nothing in the trash. Whoever it was for, she'd already delivered it. Rachel came down an hour later wearing a pale blue dress and her gold bracelet, the one she wore on special occasions. Her makeup was light but deliberate. Her smile was already loaded. "Morning," she said softly, kissing my cheek. "Happy almost Mother's Day." I nodded, handing her a cup. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah." "You?" "Didn't really." She glanced at me, but didn't push. She just sipped and walked over to the table where the place settings were already half laid out. "Need help with anything?" I asked. "Nope," she said. "Just waiting on Mom and Tom. They said they'd be here around 10. That was the first time she said his name, Tom, in weeks. Not since before I started noticing the shift. Not since before the car, the tie, the cufflinks. And when she said it, she did it too quickly, like she needed to push it through her teeth before it stuck. I checked the cameras again around 9. Nothing yet. No motion. Guest room still clean. Backyard clear. I poured myself a second coffee and paced slowly through the house. The only place I hadn't checked since last night was the basement. It was mostly storage, holiday decorations, a few workout mats, some things from when we moved in, but now it felt different. I hadn't thought to put a camera there. It wasn't part of the pattern, but that might have been the mistake. I crept down the steps. Everything looked the same. Boxes stacked against the wall, the treadmill in the corner, the smell of sealed cardboard and dry air. But as I turned toward the far wall, something caught my eye. A pillow on the floor, flattened slightly. Beside it, a blanket folded. Not neatly, just halfway tossed over itself like someone left in a rush. I stared at it for a long time. No one slept down here. I heard the front door open upstairs. Rachel's voice. "Hey, you're early." Susan. And Tom. I moved slowly up the basement stairs. Took a deep breath halfway. My hand hovered over the doorknob, and I paused there just listening. Tom's voice was too casual, too light. Rachel was laughing. When I opened the door, they were already in the living room. Susan setting down her purse. Tom smiling. Rachel closing the front door behind them. "Morning," I said, even and steady. Susan turned and smiled. "Ethan, we brought the pastries you like." I nodded. "Thanks." Tom gave a short wave. "Smells good in here." "Should," I replied. "Been up since 6 getting ready." Rachel gave me a look. Not fear, curiosity. Like she was wondering how long I'd been listening. We went through the motions. Brunch came together. Eggs, fruit, mimosas, all of it. Small talk bounced around the table like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. I watched Tom's eyes. He never looked at Susan when he talked. But he looked at Rachel often. Too often. Quick glances. Fast hops. Like muscle memory. Rachel kept glancing at the clock. At one point, she excused herself to go check the coffee. Tom waited 2 beats. Then stood. "Bathroom," he said, disappearing down the hall. He counted to 10. Then stood up and walked after them. That's when I realized I'd left my phone charging on the basement shelf. I stepped quietly down the hall, rounded the corner, and stopped. The basement door was cracked. I heard movement below. Laughter. Then silence. Something inside me shut off. I turned around, walked back through the living room, and sat beside Susan. "You okay?" she asked, noticing my face. I nodded. "I just remembered something. I left my phone downstairs. I'm going to grab it." She smiled. "Okay." I stood, and this time, I took the camera with me. I took the stairs slowly, each footstep quiet, steady, controlled. My fingers were clenched around the phone, not because I needed it, but because I needed something to hold. The hallway behind me was filled with soft brunch music and Susan's voice asking Rachel if the eggs needed salt. Upstairs, everything was still intact. The illusion held. But down here, below the floorboards, reality was waiting. As I reached the bottom step, I heard them. Low voices. Murmured. Familiar. Her voice first, soft, coaxing. His just behind it, amused. Too comfortable. The kind of tone you don't use unless it's second nature. I walked toward the far corner of the basement where the storage shelves ended and the couch sat against the wall. The last time anyone had used that couch was Christmas, when Tom had fallen asleep there during a movie. Or so I thought. I stopped 5 feet from the door. It wasn't fully shut, just resting on the frame, like someone might come back any second. There was movement inside. Fabric rustling. Then silence. I didn't hesitate. I pushed the door open. Rachel turned first. Her eyes went wide before her body moved. Tom sat on the edge of the couch, half-turned, frozen mid-reach. The silence hit harder than anything I could have said. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her hands pulled at her sleeves. Her body shifted as if she thought she could fold herself out of the moment. Tom didn't speak, didn't stand. He just stared. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask a question. I didn't demand an answer. I lifted the phone, hit record, took 3 slow steps forward, held the screen steady. Neither of them moved. Rachel's lips quivered, but her voice never came. Tom finally blinked. His jaw clenched. Still, he said nothing. I stood there for 7 seconds. Maybe more. Just enough. Then I turned, walked out the way I came. Each step felt like stone, but my mind was clear. The fog of uncertainty, the weight of suspicion, it was gone. I had the truth. Cold, real, undeniable. I climbed the stairs slowly, the phone still recording until I reached the top. I ended the video, locked the screen, and slipped it into my pocket. Susan was placing forks on the table when I walked back in. "Got it," I said quietly. Rachel wasn't behind me. Susan glanced toward the hallway. "Where's Tom?" I poured myself a glass of water and took a long sip. My hands didn't shake. "In the basement," I said. "With Rachel." She looked confused. What? What?" I set the glass down. "Don't worry. I filmed it for you." The words hung there, weightless for a moment, before gravity slammed them down. Her smile collapsed. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. I stepped back and pulled out my phone. Rachel appeared in the doorway then, face pale, eyes puffy, lips pressed together like a seal barely holding water. Tom was behind her. He looked at the floor. Susan stood still as the world shifted beneath her. I played the video. No sound, just the image. Her daughter, her husband, in her son-in-law's house. On a Sunday, meant to celebrate motherhood. Rachel tried to speak, reached out a hand. Susan swayed, and I caught her, not with arms, but with words. "She's all yours now," I said to Tom. "Just not under my roof." I turned to Rachel. Her mouth trembled again, but nothing came out. "Suitcases by the door," I said. "I packed it last night. I had a feeling brunch would need an intermission." I looked back at Susan. Her hand covered her mouth. Her eyes didn't blink. Then I added, calmly, "Happy Mother's Day. But you didn't expect to give birth to your own competition." And with that, I walked out. No shouting, no drama, just the sound of the front door closing behind me, the click of finality louder than anything I could have screamed. I didn't go far after walking out. Just down the block, around the corner to my car parked 2 houses over. I sat there in silence, engine off, listening to my breath. The world outside looked the same, but everything had changed. The illusion was gone. The faces were still familiar, but the roles they played, wife, stepfather, family, those were burned out. Ash now, and ash doesn't rebuild. I turned my phone over in my hand, replayed the footage one last time, and uploaded it to a private drive. A backup of the backup. Then I forwarded the link to one place, my lawyer. She'd handled a coworker's ugly divorce last year and owed me a favor. I didn't explain anything in the message, just the link and one line. Divorce begins Monday. I'll call. I didn't need fireworks. I needed clarity, and I had it now. The rest would follow. By noon, I was back at the house. Rachel was gone. So was Tom. I walked in through the garage, and the silence hit like static. No dishes clinking. No laughter. No more pretending. Susan's purse was still on the counter, but she wasn't in the kitchen. I found her in the backyard, sitting on one of the porch chairs, staring out across the grass like it wasn't real. She didn't speak. Didn't turn. I didn't either. I just stood beside her for a few seconds. "I'm sorry," I said. Still nothing. Then her voice came, dry and quiet. "How long?" "Don't know," I admitted, but it wasn't new. She nodded, slow and broken. "I raised her better." "No," I said. "You raised her exactly the way she wanted to be." That earned me a look, but I didn't take it back. I wasn't angry. I was past that. I was cutting the rod out. I handed her a manila envelope. "Copy of the footage. Do what you want with it. Keep it. Burn it. Send it to his job. I'm not touching it again." She didn't take it at first. Then slowly she did. Her hand shook when she reached out. I went back inside and made a list. One column, utilities in my name. Second column, items I'd be removing from the house. Third column, passwords I needed to change. I wasn't dragging this out. I wasn't staying in some limbo where she could beg or spin a story or blame childhood trauma. I packed everything I owned into boxes and moved them to the garage. Every shirt, every book, every tool. I filled my car with the first load, dropped it at a storage unit, and came back for the second. Around 4, I left a note on the kitchen table. "You have until tomorrow to collect your things." After that, I'm done being polite. I took the key off my ring and set it beside it. Then I posted the listing, queen bed. Barely used, unless you count your wife cheating in it. Free to whoever picks it up first. I didn't include a photo. I didn't need to. That evening, I sent one more message to Rachel. It was short. No questions. No begging. Just this: "You two deserve each other. Be sure to thank your mom. She gave you the tools. You just picked the most familiar target." I blocked her number after that. Changed every password. Flagged my credit accounts. I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. The final move came Sunday night. I called Tom's office and left a voicemail. Just one sentence. "Your staff deserves to know who you are." No name. No threat. Just a promise wrapped in suggestion. The story was already spreading. Susan had a sister in Arizona and a temper that didn't wait for sunrise. Rachel's cousins would know by Monday. The fallout would snowball. I wouldn't need to lift a finger. And that was the beauty of it. I didn't have to burn anything down. I just handed them the match. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.